My name is Gokhan Arik. You can say Gokhan, whatever easier. Many people call me Goku from the composite, so I'm okay with anything. I don't have problems. I'm an Android developer at CRI. I've been there for like 3 years, and I've been doing mobile for like about 4 or 5 years.
Longest running intern.
Yeah, I did 2.5 year internship. They called me forever intern, then and I did full time past 6 months. I've been sticking around for a while. And today's topic is Realm. It's an alternative for database in Android. It's a replacement for SQLite and core data in iOS. It first started as for iOS, and later they started for Android. It's a cross-platform. It supports Android, iOS, and I think JavaScript and Xamarin also. It was founded by 2 engineers, Alexander Stinson and I don't know I cannot spell his name. They both were working at they were engineers at Nokia in Finland, and they started a company called TypeDB in the past, and then it became Realm after they got founded by a combinator. It is memory efficient because the core Realm library is in C++. They first released in July 2014, and in 2 weeks, it was on the iOS that time. It reached like 200,000 developers in only 2 weeks. And right now, it's running more than on 1 billion devices. And they say 1 or 2 out of 10 apps using Realm in production right now. So switching to Realm is something like that from another database. So the second speech here mostly for experienced people, not for beginners. So I'm assuming you've been doing Android for a while, most of you, or at least some of you, and you've been dealing with that, creating database in Android, you know, like writing all the table names, column names. You know how painful it was before Realm. So why Realm? 5 categories. First one, it is faster than SQLite and other ones like Green DAO. They say like up to 10 or 100%, but I have a doubt that I read an article a couple of days ago. He was a host of the DroidCon in New York City. He has a really nice article about the comparison of the databases. I attached the link to his blog post at the end of the article slide. Second thing, it is easy to use. Third thing, object conversion. 4, it is free. And 5, it has very nice documentation and support. So if we start with the speed, the performance, that's what they show on their website. If you go to their website, that's for Android. This is the Realm, SQLite, Formlite, and Green DAO. They say these are the inserts per second, like 20,000, and as they claim SQLite is 9,000. But the article I read, the guy says these are all fake because they never released what type of test they made, you know. They say they kind of faked it, they put different type of data in the Realm and then completely different in SQLite. He was complaining about how marketing and PR is terrible at Realm. He ran his own tests and performance. Realm was like maybe 3rd, maybe 4th on the list. He claimed that Green DAO is way faster than that, but if you look here, it looks like the worst here, Green DAO. It's same for the counts also. If you look at inserts, counts, and queries, you will see that they claim Realm is the fastest. But I've been using Realm since its first version. I think they released in September 2014. First version was 0.70. And the main reason I use it, it's easier to use, as I said. I didn't have to make a performance analysis because I never developed like high-speed application. I used it for my class projects, my own projects, and we used it in production at the company I work also. Easy to use, as I said earlier, this is how we would do it in Android before. If you have a table, you would have like database name, like table name, column, ID name. You would have to write down everything one by one, and it was a pain. You would have to have database helper class, and you would have to have content provider. With Realm, it's way easier because it's all based on the objects. This, for example, there could be a table like all traditional. Like instead of having like column, ID, name, email, script, all you have to do is create a model class, and you have to mention that it extends Realm object. Otherwise, Realm is not going to recognize it. And the third thing is it's completely free. Fourth thing, documentation and support. They start with 0.70, and right now, a couple of weeks ago, I guess they released 1.00. It's been for Android around like 1.5 years, 2014 September, if I'm not wrong. These are the numbers from the GitHub. They're pretty active, answering and solving the problems reported on GitHub. As I said, I started using Realm like way early. I've been kind of in the process of development. I was complaining about them, the issues, and I still always, get notifications on GitHub like these issues solved. Some people are still complaining, but mostly what I observe is like they're pretty good responding. 1,400 issues they already solved, and there are 2,300 questions on Stack Overflow. So it's a nice. When I used OrmLite before Realm, it was kind of impossible to find documentation. Even right now, you don't see anything about OrmLite. Their documentation was terrible. It was hard to find people on Stack Overflow to answer your questions. So if we dive into how does it work? First of all, these are the general things we should know. There is no maven or end support for Realm. It is just Gradle. It supports Android API level 9 and above, which is Gingerbread Android 2.3. And after last release, which is 1.0, they stopped supporting Eclipse also. And you don't need program configuration because they completely changed the way you attach it to Gradle. Now they need the library project library, and they have their own program configuration, so you don't have to mess with any of this. First, this is the simplest way how you edit Gradle. You just include it, but make sure that step one, you add it to your project level Gradle file. If you guys are familiar already, you have project level and module level Gradle file. Project level is the top level, and module level could be for mobile app, for wearable, or for Android TV. You add this to your project level Gradle file, and it's a plugin. I said it library earlier, sorry about that. And step two, you apply this plugin in your specific module. It's so easy, and then once you sync your Gradle, you will have all the library imported. I showed a really simple earlier, simple example. I will go into more detail here. That will be your entity in the old model. I have a user entity here that extends Realm object. Sometimes you forget and it's going to complain to you. So it supports, we have string name, integer age, it supports all the primitive types. There is an annotation of ignore. If you put an annotation, Realm is not going to persist that in the form, it's just going to ignore it. Yes.
I noticed you don't have an ID in here. Does that automatically generate for you?
ID?
Yeah. Your primary key.
I will come to that in some other page, yeah. It supports public, private, and protected all the fields. In the past, it didn't have custom methods. You could only have getter and setter methods. If you wanted to override equals or toString method, for example, it was impossible. But after 0.88, they added this functionality. I am also trying to go into detail like what new features are, because many problem with people using Realm is when they first released it, they used it, they got too excited about that, and then they realized that some certain features are missing, and then they stopped using it, and they never look back what improvements they made, because I did the same thing like 6 months ago. I'm like, I had a couple of problems, I will never use that. That's what I said exactly. You will see some blog spots on the internet, they say that Realm is awesome, but too early to use it. So I will also try to mention you guys like what the changes they made, in that 1.5 years. So custom method was like really big improvement, because toString or equals method, some other methods, we always need that, and it came in 0.88. Also, you don't have to have getter and setter. You can just make them public and assign them, but you don't have finite, transient, or volatile fields there. And you cannot extend any other class other than Realm object. This is the biggest issue right now. They still didn't fix that. You can only extend Realm object, so there is no inheritance. Primary key comes here. Here we have, you can add index to any field. If you guys familiar with the plain object Java, you can add like primary key. This indicates that ID is a primary key. You can also add any field like index, but if you are using a primary key, you don't have to put index because primary key already implies that it is indexed. It's not recommended to use index. If you do that, insert time is gonna be longer. So you have to be real careful when you are using it. You should know why you are using it. So we say, I'm going to talk about primary keys later. Sometimes you're going to have JSON values like array list of integers or strings. Realm doesn't support that yet. If you have array list of strings, it's not going to work. So what the workaround this is, what people do, they create a wrapper class, something like realm string, realm integer, and then you make a list of this. It's still a big problem. They're working on that. Other than that, all the primitive types like boolean, byte, short, int, long, they all supported. But the primitive types, the integer types, long, int, and byte, short, in the realm they'll convert it to long. That's not something really you need to know. The box types like string, date, integer, and double, now nullable. Before you didn't have null value up to 0.83. After 0.83, you can make them null. In the past, you would have to assign a value over there. If it is a string, you would usually, if it is an integer, you would make a set weight -1, and that was actually a great solution. But after 0.83, you don't have to set anything. If you don't set, it's going to be null by default, or you can just say set weight to null. Another cool thing about Realm is auto update feature. Realm objects are live auto updating objects, which means if you have the object, you never have to refresh the object. Let's say you brought some information about the user from your database, okay? You have the same object you are showing to user, and then in the background you made a call to the server, and then you get new data. The data gets refreshed. It's going to refresh automatically your Realm object, unless you convert it to something else. And that's good because you don't have to worry about the UI, it gets automatically updated, which makes it faster. Like a really simple example here, we create a dog object here using the Realm create object. We set name Fido and set age 1, and we bring the object here, and later we change age to 2. It was 1 here, I got the object and I changed it to 2. But when I print it, even though I retrieved it here, these one automatically apply here, and the same object, the value gets updated, and here it's going to print to the latest value.
Quick question: is that an asynchronous execution for that transaction? Then, could that mine get age ever be 1?
This one is not asynchronous. I will talk about that in the query section. This one is just a regular transaction. But here this one is not asynchronous. This is the execute transaction. It is same as begin transaction and commit transaction. It just handles all. You don't have to worry about anything. But we will talk about that. So it makes your code like simpler. Let's say if your activity or fragment depends on some like Realm object, you don't need to worry about refreshing or prefetching it. It also has a notifications feature. Let's say, like from the previous example, you got the data, you have the dog, which age is 1, and later in the background, maybe some other thread changed age to 2. You want to get notified if something has changed, Maybe you want to change, let's say you have a value, you are showing in the application like 30%. If it goes to -30%, you want to change the color, right? You want to know how it changed. If you had a listener here, you will get notified when it changes. But don't forget to remove your listeners in your once-through method. Did you have a question? Okay. Primary keys again. It's okay. When we are for Realm, we have a couple methods. One is copy to Realm, and another one is copy to Realm or update. If you use the copy to Realm, it's gonna create a new object in the Realm, or it's gonna throw exception if you have an object with the same primary key. But if you use copy to Realm or update, you can see that from the name clearly. If it doesn't exist, it's gonna create a new one. But if it exists, it's just gonna update the existing object. But when you are using this method, you just have to be careful because you have to make sure that it has a primary key, otherwise it's gonna give you error. There's another option, which is just create object, we used on the previous page. You can use it if you are assigning primary key by yourself. Otherwise, it's gonna have, because primary key, as I said earlier, after 083, strings and other box type, they can have null values. If you make a primary key string, by default it's gonna be null. And later you will create another object with the same primary key and it's gonna cause a problem.
So they still don't support like any sort of notion of auto-incrementing?
No, they don't have auto-incrementing yet. I was gonna look at that actually before I come here, but
Because that was the issue when I used
yes.
it. I couldn't use it to create classes because since they're live, I'd have conflicting primary keys. So I always had to create my own and then insert. But then I had to keep track of what the last primary key was and see the kind of comes.
I didn't have much time to look at the latest one, 100. I am not sure if it is solved or not. So I'm not gonna make a comment.
Yeah,
but as far as I know, it's not solved yet.
Yeah.
As far as I know, it's not
How
solved.
do you handle it? How do you handle keeping track of your primary keys?
You can just retrieve the old object, whatever the old value, you can just increment it. Or for the projects I did, usually I get data from the server, from the cloud, and it already has ID. All ID is, just all ID is put over there, so I don't need to worry about that. So for the relationships, composition, you can do compositions like using plain object Java. You have an email class here, which extends realm object, and you have a contact class here. You have an email as a field here, but make sure email extends realm object, otherwise it's going to give error. If you don't want to save the email, if you don't want to pass it in the database, you just have to put ignore here, so email doesn't have to extend the realm object class.
Will that be like a runtime error file?
That's a good question. I'm not
Just
sure.
compile time.
Probably. Probably, yeah. Compile time? No, I'm not sure about that. So relationships, many to many. As I said, it doesn't have. Earlier I mentioned that you cannot have real list of box types like string, integer, or double. But if it's a custom class like email, it's possible. Another thing is they have a realm list, which is actually abstractly list in Java. So you cannot use array list or anything, but you have all the functions you have in the array list because they all extend the abstract Java list class. You just yeah. Write operations is one of the most important things.
Gokhan, can you go back to the menu?
Yes. I'm trying to remember why I put the second screenshot. I don't remember. I forgot to put notes for that. Oh, it's just showing you. Sorry. Okay, you have a list here. It's just showing you how do you add to that. You create contact here, and you have a email here. You just all you do is contact emails, add just like you do in the array list. I put that to show it extends it implements the Java abstract list class. So it's all the methods you have in the list or array list, you're gonna have it here. Right, every time you make operation in realm, you have to get the instance. I will talk about the realms at the end, but right now, all you have the realm class here. You say get default instance, and you have the realm instance. All your write read operations, this instance is gonna handle that. You start a transaction. All the write operations, they have to be in a transaction. Read operations, you don't need transactions for read operations, but write operations, you have to. You just begin a transaction, you add, delete, or update objects, and then you commit transaction. This is a really simple example. But here, if you don't wanna, let's say you begin transaction, you create some object, and something went wrong, you didn't wanna commit that, you can also call cancel transaction, so nothing is gonna be persisted.
Question. What happens if you did user equals new user?
Which one?
Like let's say you instantiated the user model like you would normally instantiate a user model. So you go user equals new user, like
Okay.
a new instance of the class. What would happen? You just
Nothing would happen. If you want to create object, you have to call the create object class of Realm. Otherwise, you would just create a random object. When you try to add that to Realm, I don't know if it would work. It would probably throw you an error.
You can do that, but then you have to do the copy around if you want to actually.
Oh yes. You either say create object, you use the create object method, or you can create object as you said, yeah, I remember now, and then you say copy to Realm or update. Creating objects here, still same thing, it's just more detailed. Use begin a transaction. You create an object here, as you said. And then you set the name, set the email, and you say commit transaction. That's what you select. I actually included that. If you don't want to use the create object, as David said earlier, you can just play object the normal way you did in Java. You set email, and then you begin transaction, and then you say copy to React. It's gonna add to that. I think that's answers your question.
Yeah.
Okay. So creating objects, this is same as what we have here, like begin transaction, commit transaction. It just handles all of them. You just say execute transaction, and inside the execute method, you create object. You don't have to do anything after that. It's going to automatically handle beginning transaction, committing, or canceling if something goes wrong. Another method, this one introduced in 084, a couple months ago, I believe. And this is pretty cool because all the operations were running on the main thread in Android. And if you have a big data, it's a really big problem there because you don't want to block the UI. You don't want users to look at your signaler all the time, frozen. So this is pretty cool feature. The on success and on error, these are optional. You don't have to include these callbacks. You just call execute transaction. It's gonna run this test in the background. Another important thing is here we created a transaction. Do I have an example? You can see the transaction if it is cancelled or not. If it is not cancelled, you can cancel. Let's say this is really important. This is one of the biggest problems we have in Android. You make a call to server cloud to get some data. User is looking at the phone, and then they press the home button. Your activity is paused. And in the background test, you get the data, and if you try to show a dialog or if you commit a fragment transaction, it's going to crash because activity UI is not visible to user. So it's important to cancel all your transactions in on-stop method. Right, there is the Square has a library called Auto Event Bus. It kind of handles that. I overlooked at that. But still, like whatever library you are using, it's really important to cancel your transactions. It is not just specific to Realm, it is with everything you run, for all the tests you run in the background. Queries, all the fetches in Realm lazy, data is never copied. Do I need to explain every lazy loading? I think everybody knows about that. You just create a Realm query, you show your model, you want to get user model. The where was important part. This you show what your entity is, if it is a user or contact or whatever it is. You can add conditions here like the name equal to John or name equal to John or Peter here, and it's going to turn you a list of Realm results. I think Realm results also, it also inherits abstract list class, so you have all the functions you have in the Java list. When you say query find all, it's going to synchronous, it's going to find all the results. Or another, you can chain them all. It's still the same thing, there's no difference between them. These are some of the conditions you can use. You had the same thing in the Moonlight also. I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with that. If it's empty or null, it's greater than or smaller than. Sorting. This is the old way of sorting. I think it was before 086. We used to have Realm results. They made a change and they created the sort enum here. That was a breaking change at this time. You can also chain queries. Let's say you get list of teenagers here. Using the same Realm results, you can run another query and you can say like, get the first one whose name is John. This is, as earlier I said, we had transactions, asynchronous transaction. In the same release in 084, they also released asynchronous queries, because sometimes read operations usually cheaper, they are not that expensive, but sometimes you might have to fetch like thousands of elements. So this was kind of missing thing. They attached, they included asynchronous queries. All you do is, in the previous page we called find all method. Here what you do is you just call find all asynchronous method, and this is using the, if you guys familiar with the promise or the future in Java, this is working the same way. Whenever the data is ready, there is no callback or anything. It's just gonna go into your result object. Earlier I said you can have notifications. It's same here. You can have notifications here, and when data changes, you can check it. You're gonna get notified once data is ready if you are running asynchronous test in the background. This another thing is, as I said earlier, removing your listeners on stuff. It's a good thing. It's a recommended way. Also, you can check if the result is loaded or not. You don't want to put a callback, or you don't want to worry about that. You just want to check if the result is ready. You can just call this method. So this is default Realm configuration. If you just download the library, you don't want to worry about anything. You just want to make a sample like test application. All you have to do is in your application, it could be your activity too. You just create a configuration and you say like set default configuration. You go to your activity and you say get default instance. It's gonna bring this instance. But if you are working on a more complex application, you can have multiple schemas. If you are worried about the migrations, you can have multiple migration schemes. Like here, there are two configurations here. It says my config and other config. This one schema version is 2. This one is 5. They are using custom scheme and other scheme different. But when you get the instance, you just go like get instance for my config and get instance for other config. This is important, especially when you do migration. I don't know if I included that here. This is probably one of the most important things. I've seen some applications on the internet. People are creating, like getting default instance, but they never close it. So real instance, they are like reference counter. So every time you call get instance in a thread, if you call like 2 times, 3 times, it's gonna, you have to call close 2, 3 times also. So the simplest way is you should call the get instance method in your onCreate method in the activity, and on this thread, you should just close it. You should check if it is open and you should close it. If you have it, I think this is the first case. If you're already on a thread or in some background, you can just look through it and you can say if it is not blue, just close the object. This one is important. Why? Closing your instance early or late can cause you problems. Earlier I said that Realm is doing the lazy instantiation. Let's say you have a user class and it has a friend list, array list of friends, and other like a list of users. When you pull the user class, it's not going to bring all the friends, it's just going to bring the user. What I saw is people usually say like, okay, get default instance, get the user, and as soon as they do the call, they close the instance. And then later somewhere else in the code, they say like, hey, bring the friends of this user. But you didn't eager, installation, instantiation, you did lazy instantiation. It's going to crash and you're not going to get any data. I saw in this one, in like a couple really important applications. JSON, if you have data coming as this is a simple like string, JSON in a string, you can just you just showed what your model is. Here it's Siri, which has only Siri and ID fields. It's going to automatically create an object from the JSON file.
Quick question: do you know how it does that? Does it just do its own manual parsing, or can you give it a certain parser to parse with like Jackson or JSON or something?
It has some certain rules. For example, if your JSON has a value and there is no field in the object, so it's not gonna assign any value to that because you don't have it. It's gonna ignore that JSON value. There are some in the past they had different configurations. For example, if it was a missing value, it would just crash, it would give you, it would throw you an error. They have like 4 or 5 different rules on their website. I didn't copy them all, but I know like there are 4 or 5 different criteria. If there is no field in your object, in your model, it's gonna ignore that, you know. If you have a field in the object, but if you don't have it in the JSON, it depends on the type. If you remember earlier, I said that box types like string, integer, and double, they can be null. So it's gonna automatically set default value of null. But if it's an integer or some other value, I think that's where it's gonna give you error. I don't think it's gonna assign default value to integer or primitive types. So these are a couple of specific things to Android. This one comes about, and this is everything I get here is from their website. All I did was taking screenshots all day and putting it here basically. So whatever is available here, it's on their documentation. So the realm, since you extend the realm object, they are not parcelable. You cannot put them in a bundle and you cannot pass them around. What you can do is this is just kind of, there's not specific to realm, it's just a way of doing thing. You can pass the ID if you are passing intent another activity or another service, and another service you can just retrieve the ID and you can get your realm instance and retrieve that person. I saw some people trying to pass the realm object, trying to put it into bundle and trying to make it parcelable, but there is no need for that because read operations are really fast and cheap in realm. Yes, another thing is asynchronous test in Android. It's which intent service and asynchronous test, they run in the background. I think I mentioned that earlier. Yeah, so every time you use get default instance, they have to do, you cannot use it in their own thread. Since asynchronous test runs in a background thread or different thread, you have to make sure that you are getting there. I've seen people before on the Stack Overflow or GitHub, I'm not sure, they would create it in their activity and then they would pass realm here and then they would say like, hey, realm is not working, because it's right, you created realm in a different thread and trying to use it on a different thread. So if you are using it on asynchronous test or intent service or anything else, make sure that you create the instance in the same thread. Debugging, this another thing that comes about. Let's say you have a person object here, you put a breakpoint, you open your debugger, you put a watch order for person. When you look at the values here, all you're going to see is default values. If it's integer, it's going to be 0. If it's an object type, it's going to be null. You're not going to see anything. But if you use accessor and say like person.getAge, that's when you're going to get value. I explained that a lot, because we are used to see value over there. I see people like they are trying to debug and they're like, there is no value here, there is no value here. But there is a value, but you have to use accessor for that. Yeah. The two important things, my final notes. Many people recommend performing non-write operations in the background thread, especially if it is a big data. If it's like a really small amount, like a couple objects, I don't think it matters because write operations are, as I said, really fast and down. Another thing is, I already mentioned that you access data easily. Just make sure you are watching when you are opening and when you are closing it. This is the article I said. This is the guy, I think his name was Kevin. He's the host at TradeCon in New York City. And it's a blog post of his presentation that compares all the databases, SQLite, Grindao, and Real. That's where I read that the complaints about the performance of Real. So it's a really nice article, I would recommend it. Another is Real website, last one I don't even know why I put that. It might be something important. I'll put the link to the meetup page so you guys can see it there. Any questions?
So regarding threading, can realm objects that you retrieved pass between threads, or are those restricted to the thread they were retrieved?
You cannot. As far as I know, you cannot.
So how do you handle things like, this isn't strictly threading, but say like a user was going to edit something that was stored. Do you use like, intermediate objects to basically clones of what the realm object is? So what if they change something but then cancel or undo? How would you handle something like that with a live updating realm object?
I don't quite understand.
So let's say they opened a contact that you stored in a database, and they went to edit the contact, and they changed the email.
Okay.
Since realm objects are live updated, that object is now has the new email. Now what if they hit cancel? I guess I just see a lot of people saying that they basically create duplicates of realm objects to be able to handle state that they don't necessarily want to persist automatically, and it just seems kind of excessive. But I guess I don't really
to have that situation, because all your write operations are going to be inside a transaction.
Okay.
If you have two asynchronous transactions, they're going to be queued and whatever executed first.
So
and since it's live, always the latest one is going to be executed.
So if you retrieve an object and modify a property called cancel transaction, is that object no longer modified? Because I thought
if you modify object and if you say cancel transaction, it's not going to be modified.
Oh, okay.
Unless you say commit. That's the thing, you have like three different methods. Like one is traditional way, begin transaction, commit transaction, another one execute, and another one execute transaction. It all depends on use case. If you are worried about that, some other thread would maybe modify the data, what you would do is you would start begin transaction, and then you would check that if the data is what you were expecting, you would check that if it is what you were expecting, you would commit the transaction. Otherwise, you would cancel the transaction. Because once you start the transaction, it's kind of locked, so no one else is going to be able to access to it. Or if that answers your question.
Yeah.
Any other questions? How are you doing with time, by the way?
30 minutes.
Really?
Okay. Well, we started early too. We started 10 minutes early.
Okay. Makes sense. I was surprised if I'm sure.
More questions?
If you call get default instance, so let's say you call it in your on-creating activity, can you call, what happens if you call get default instance from a background? Is that gonna,
You still get the same your default instance.
so wouldn't that throw an error? Because you're accessing the same realm instance from two threads.
Oh, you are saying at the same time if you are accessing.
Yeah, so your on-create activity, you opened it, then you're gonna close it and on-destroy it, you're gonna make your life easy, I guess.
There is nothing wrong with creating different instances. The important point people missing is closing them.
So get default instance creates a new instance. It's not really the same instance. It's just a new instance of the default configuration.
I think it's giving you the same instance, but it's just counting how many times it gave to you. So you still have one singleton.
So you can call get default instance from different threads.
Yeah, it basically you have one instance. As far as I know, you have one instance. It's just counting how many times it gave you, and it's just checking, when you close it, if it is 0 or not. If you close them all, it's basically a counter. Any other questions? Did anybody use Realm here before?
Try.
I tried when it first came out.
And then you didn't like it and you never looked at it, right?
I think I was at like 29 or something. So I do want to look at it again.
Are they actively trying to fix the extension issue? We got to extend realm object for inheritance and stuff?
They are working on. There is an issue. I looked at this morning. There is an issue opened. I mean, they are working on that, but it's not their highest priority, as far as I see. But they are saying they're gonna get it done sometime soon. I mean, looking at the progress they made in just 1.5 years, I mean, I think they are doing like a pretty good job. Every time I ask question or post a comment, they have a pretty active GitHub page. I mean, it's obvious that they are working on things. In another maybe 1.5 years, it could be like way better unless something else comes out. I saw there's another library called BigQuery, I guess. I don't know if anyone used it. That seems also a cool library. I didn't have a chance to look at it much, but it looks like something cool.
So could you extend an object that extends to a realm object when you get a compile time error? So
If you extend an object that extends realm object, the child object is not gonna be persisted in the realm. They have a workaround for that. Recently they released something called interface model. I was gonna attach it here, but since I never played around and I don't know much about it, so I didn't put it here. What you do is you kind of implement a class. Interface model. Yeah, they have something like that. I didn't quite understand what's going on here. They tell them, the realm class, and then they want you to implement realm model. It's a class provided by them, and it says all methods are going to be available. This is the old way, like the regular way of doing it. Extending realm object. This is with realm model, but I don't know how it's different and how it helps. So I don't know anything about that. That's why I don't put it there.
Yeah, that seems fairly new. Because when I looked into it, I didn't have anything like that, so that's pretty cool.
Any other questions? So what do you guys think about realm compared to warm light or green dough? I never use green dough actually, or the old traditional way we do things and trade.
That was another question I had actually. So we use warm light right now, and between 7 and 8 developers, migrations can get sort of hectic because you have to upgrade the database version every single time.
Okay.
So there's no idea of like migrations or anything like that, right? It's like all sort of just
In realm,
done via the realm objects.
you can. I thought I attached it to the here, but it looks like I didn't try that straight off the website. If you remember earlier, I showed that you can create different configurations. Here, what you do is basically here. Let's say you have a configuration here, realm configuration. You say the version is 2, and you have a migration class here. And here, when you say the migrate, it just retrieves the schema here. It brings the schema here and it looks at the version. But you have to do it manually. If in version when you edit person class, for example, you say scheme like create person, add field. So you kind of have to do it all manually. I've never done migration because the only
Just do it right the first time.
yeah, just uninstall the application and tell the users uninstall the application.
Yeah, it's all. There's still, yeah, you'll still get.
Just drop the database every time and retrieve all data.
Some people are pretty, conservative about using Realm, so some people think it's not production ready. I think it all depends on your project. If you don't have too much hierarchy, too many like complicated things, if you don't have to deal with things like, I think it's okay to use. I mean, Google, like Amazon, there are big major companies using it in their projects. Maybe in some parts of their projects, not the entire application, but I know that the companies with it. So they have a nice documentation in different languages, and cool thing is they have documentation for like all the versions. You can go all the way down to first version 0.17 and see the documentation, what changed. On their GitHub page also, the change log is pretty nice. It shows you what are the breaking changes, what are the new features.
You have pretty good samples in there, too.
Yeah, I was going to make demo application, but as I said, there are too many demo applications.
They don't have like
There is no need to reinvent the wheel. On their website, all the way down, I think they have the list of the applications. You're going to find hundreds of applications. I want more focus on the more important things. They have a real browser that's some other thing, it's something cool. So. Are we done? Right side is so quiet. David,
What?
you have the show now.
Oh, you done?
Yeah, it's not.
Well, thanks, Gokhan.